The bus rattled through another pothole, and Elena pressed her forehead against the cold window, watching the endless stretch of highway disappear behind her. 2,000 miles. That's how far she'd traveled from the crumbling apartment in Detroit to this godforsaken corner of Montana. Her entire life fit into the worn duffel bag at her feet, 3 changes of clothes, a photograph of her mother, and the letter that had started all of this. The letter from her father. She'd found it tucked in her mother's belongings after the funeral, written in shaky handwriting she didn't recognize. If anything happens to me, go to your father. Robert Chen. He lives in Copper Ridge, Montana. He'll take care of you. 23 years of lies condensed into 3 sentences. 23 years of believing her father was dead, when he'd simply chosen not to exist in her life. Elena had nothing left in Detroit. The factory where she'd worked had closed 6 months ago. The landlord had already changed the locks on her apartment. Her boyfriend, if she could call him that, had stolen what little money she'd saved and disappeared. She was drowning, and this letter was the only lifeline she had, even if it led to a man who'd abandoned her before she could walk. The bus driver called out Copper Ridge, and Elena's stomach twisted. The town was smaller than she'd imagined, just a main street lined with weathered storefronts, a diner with a flickering neon sign, and pickup trucks coated in dust. She stepped off the bus into the bitter cold, her thin jacket offering little protection against the wind that swept down from the mountains. She found her father's address easily enough. The house sat at the edge of town, a small ranch-style building with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Elena stood at the gate for a full 5 minutes before forcing her feet to move. She climbed the 3 steps and knocked. The door opened, and a man in his 50s stared at her with bloodshot eyes. His face was weathered, his hair gray, and he smelled like cheap whiskey even at 2 in the afternoon. Behind him, Elena could see a woman on the couch, younger, with bleached hair and a hostile expression. Robert Chen? Elena's voice came out smaller than she intended. Who's asking? His words slurred slightly. I'm Elena. Elena Martinez. Your daughter. The color drained from his face. For a moment, she thought he might slam the door. Instead, he stepped back, and the woman on the couch sat up straight. You've got to be kidding me, the woman said. Bobby, tell me this is a joke. I didn't know where else to go, Elena said quickly. My mom died. I have the letter she left. You're my father, and I need help. Robert's jaw clenched. The woman stood up now, crossing her arms. She's not staying here, Bobby. We talked about this. Your past doesn't get to walk through that door and ruin what we have. Please, Elena said. Just for a few days. Until I figure something out. What happened next would replay in Elena's mind for weeks. Robert's face hardened into something cold and unfamiliar. I don't know what your mother told you, but I made my choice a long time ago. I signed away my rights. I paid what the court ordered. That was the deal. But I'm your daughter. You're a stranger. His voice was flat, final. I have a new family now. A fresh start. You being here complicates things I worked hard to leave behind. The woman smirked from behind him. You heard him. Get lost. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her. She'd expected rejection, maybe, but not this casual cruelty. Not this complete erasure of her existence. I traveled 2,000 miles. That's your problem, not mine. Robert was already closing the door. Wait. Elena put her hand on the door frame. I have nowhere to go. No money. Nothing. You can't just. Robert's hand shot out and shoved her backward. Elena stumbled off the porch, her bag tumbling into the dirt. Before she could process what was happening, he was down the steps, his face twisted with something between guilt and rage. You don't get to show up and guilt me, he shouted. The first blow caught her across the face, snapping her head to the side. She tasted blood. Elena tried to shield herself, but he grabbed her arm and struck her again. The woman screamed something from the porch, but the words were lost in the ringing in Elena's ears. She fell to the ground, and her father stood over her, breathing hard. Stay away from my house, he said. Stay away from my family. Then he turned and walked back inside, leaving her bleeding in the dirt. Elena didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes, maybe hours. The cold seeped through her clothes and into her bones. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the frozen ground, creating small crimson stars in the dust. Her ribs ached where his boot had connected, and her right eye was already swelling shut. She wanted to cry, but tears wouldn't come. Shock had turned her hollow. The sound of a truck engine broke through her daze. Tires crunched on gravel, and then everything went quiet. A door slammed. Jesus Christ. The voice was deep, rough, alarmed. Heavy footsteps approached, and Elena tried to push herself up, tried to run, but her body wouldn't cooperate. A shadow fell over her, and she flinched. Easy, easy. Strong hands touched her shoulders, gentle despite their size. I'm not going to hurt you. Can you hear me? Elena managed to nod. She forced her good eye open and saw a man kneeling beside her. He was probably in his early 30s, with dark hair pushed back under a worn cowboy hat, a sun-weathered face, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Concern etched deep lines around his mouth. I'm going to pick you up now, all right? We need to get you out of this cold. He didn't wait for permission. His arms slid under her knees and shoulders, and he lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Elena wanted to protest, to tell him she could walk, but the words stuck in her throat. He carried her to his truck, a battered Ford that had seen better decades, and settled her carefully in the passenger seat. The interior smelled like leather, coffee, and hay. He grabbed a blanket from behind the seat and wrapped it around her shoulders. What's your name? He asked, crouching beside the open door. Elena. It came out as a whisper. I'm Cole. Cole Brennan. That man who did this to you, is he your husband? Boyfriend? She shook her head. Father. Something dangerous flickered in Cole's eyes. He looked back at the house, his jaw tight, then back at her. You have anywhere to go? No. Anyone in this town? No. Cole was silent for a moment. Then he closed the passenger door, walked around to the driver's side, and climbed in. He started the engine but didn't put the truck in gear. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. Doc? It's Cole Brennan. I'm bringing someone to you. Woman, mid-20s, facial injuries, possible broken ribs. Yeah, I know it's Sunday. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up and finally looked at Elena. Doc Morrison is a friend. He'll patch you up, ask no questions if that's what you want. I can't pay, Elena said, her voice breaking. Didn't ask if you could. Cole pulled onto the road, driving with one hand while adjusting the heater with the other. Warm air flooded the cab. You eat today? Elena couldn't remember. The bus ride had been endless, and she'd been too nervous to eat. Cole cursed under his breath. We'll fix that too. The doctor's office was attached to his home, a tidy bungalow on the outskirts of town. Dr. Morrison was a silver-haired man in his 60s who took one look at Elena and ushered her inside without a word. Cole waited in the truck. The examination was thorough but kind. 2 cracked ribs, a split lip, severe bruising along her jaw and shoulder, and a black eye that would last for weeks. Dr. Morrison cleaned her wounds, taped her ribs, and gave her painkillers he insisted were samples so she wouldn't worry about the cost. You're lucky Cole found you, the doctor said as he worked. Another hour in that cold, and we'd be dealing with hypothermia on top of everything else. When Elena emerged, Cole was leaning against his truck, arms crossed, staring at the mountains in the distance. He straightened when he saw her. Doc says you need rest and regular meals, he said. I've got a spare room at my ranch. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm and safe. Elena stared at him. Why are you helping me? Cole's expression softened. Because nobody helped my sister when she needed it. Found her too late. He opened the passenger door. I'm not going to make that mistake again. The drive to his ranch took 20 minutes down a winding dirt road. The property sprawled across a valley, with a modest 2-story house, a large barn, and several paddocks where horses grazed in the fading light. Cole pulled up to the house and cut the engine. I run cattle and breed horses, he explained. It's just me out here since my father passed 2 years ago. I could use help around the place if you're interested, once you're healed up. Fair wages, room and board included. No obligation, though. You can stay as long as you need regardless. Elena's throat tightened. I don't understand. You don't know me. No, I don't. Cole climbed out of the truck. But I know what desperation looks like. I know what it means when someone's got nowhere left to turn. And I know this world's got too much cruelty in it already without me adding to it. He led her inside to a house that was clean but lived in. Worn furniture, stacks of ranching magazines, boots by the door. He showed her to a small bedroom upstairs with a quilt-covered bed and curtains that fluttered in the breeze from a cracked window. Bathrooms next door, Cole said. I'll make dinner. Come down when you're ready, or I can bring something up if you'd rather be alone. Elena sat on the edge of the bed after he left, finally letting the tears come. They burned her split lip and made her ribs ache, but she couldn't stop them. This stranger had shown her more kindness in 2 hours than her own blood had in a lifetime. The first week passed in a blur of pain medication and uncomfortable silences. Elena moved through Cole's house like a ghost, unsure of her place, waiting for the kindness to crack and reveal some hidden cost. But Cole remained steady, almost frustratingly so. He cooked simple meals, eggs and toast for breakfast, sandwiches for lunch, hearty stews for dinner. He worked from dawn until dusk, coming in covered in dirt and sweat, always knocking before entering a room where she might be. He never asked questions about her father. Never pressed for her story. By the second week, Elena's ribs had healed enough that she could move without wincing. The bruises had faded from purple to yellow-green, and the swelling around her eye had finally gone down. She watched Cole from the kitchen window as he worked with the horses, patient and calm, and something inside her began to thaw. She started small. Making coffee before he woke up. Washing the dishes after meals. Cole noticed but said nothing, just nodded his thanks and went about his day. Then one morning, Elena came downstairs to find him at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and studying a ledger with tired eyes. "You all right?" she asked. He looked up, surprised. Yeah. Just juggling numbers. Hired hand quit last month to take a job in Billings. Been trying to manage on my own, but..." He rubbed his face. "Sorry. Not your problem. I could help." The words came out before Elena could stop them. Cole studied her for a long moment. "You ever work with horses?" "No. But I'm a fast learner, and I need to do something. I can't just sit in this house eating your food and using your electricity without contributing." A small smile tugged at Cole's lips. "All right. We'll start easy. Meet me at the barn after breakfast." The work was harder than Elena expected. Mucking stalls, hauling water, distributing hay, it was backbreaking and endless. But it was also honest. The horses didn't judge her, didn't care about her past. They either trusted her or they didn't, and she had to earn that trust through consistency and gentleness. Cole proved to be a patient teacher. He showed her how to approach a nervous mare, how to read a horse's body language, how to clean hooves without getting kicked. He worked beside her, never asking for more than she could give, always ready to step in if she struggled. One afternoon, 3 weeks after she'd arrived, they were repairing a fence line when Elena finally spoke about Detroit. "I worked at an automotive plant," she said, hammering a nail into the post. "Assembly line. The pay was garbage, but it was steady. Then the company moved operations to Mexico, and 800 of us got pink slips on the same day." Cole listened, his hands still working the wire. "I thought I could bounce back. Find something else. But the whole city's dying. Every week another place closes. I fell behind on rent, and my boyfriend," she stopped, swallowed hard. "He wasn't a good person. I was just too desperate to see it clearly." "You made it out," Cole said quietly. "That takes strength." "I ran away to a father who beat me in his front yard." Elena's laugh was bitter. "Some strength." Cole set down his tools and turned to face her. "You survived. You got on that bus with nothing but hope and kept going even when that hope turned to ash. You're still standing. That's more strength than most people ever find." Elena met his eyes, searching for pity, but found only sincerity. Something in her chest cracked open. "Why did you really help me?" she asked. "The truth." Cole was quiet for so long Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he removed his hat and ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was uncomfortable. "My sister, Emma, was 19 when she got mixed up with a bad crowd in Billings. Drugs, abusive boyfriend, the works. She called me one night, begging for help. I was in the middle of calving season, told her I'd come get her in a few days once things settled down." His voice grew rough. "She died of an overdose 2 days later. The boyfriend had been beating her for months. If I just dropped everything and gone when she called." "That wasn't your fault," Elena said. "Maybe not. But I live with it every day. When I saw you in that dirt, looking like the world had chewed you up and spit you out, I heard Emma's voice in my head. I heard what she must have sounded like when she called. And I knew I couldn't drive past. I couldn't be too busy or too tired or too anything. Not again." Elena reached out and touched his arm. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact with anyone since arriving in Montana. "I'm sorry about your sister. I'm sorry about your father." Cole's hand covered hers briefly, warm and calloused. Then he picked up his tools. "Come on. We've got 3 more posts to set before dark." They worked in companionable silence, but something had shifted between them. Trust, fragile and new, had begun to take root. That night, over dinner, Cole asked, "You ever think about what you want to do? Long term?" Elena shrugged. "I used to want to go to college. Study veterinary medicine. But that was a lifetime ago." "Why can't it still be your dream?" "Because dreams cost money I don't have." Cole leaned back in his chair. "Community college in Helena has a good program. It's about an hour drive, but doable. They've got financial aid, scholarships for folks in your situation." "You're telling me to leave?" Elena's stomach dropped. "No." Cole's voice was firm. "I'm telling you that you've got options. You can stay here and work the ranch for as long as you want. But you can also build something bigger. And if you decide to do that, I'll help you figure out how." Elena stared at this man who'd pulled her from the dirt and asked for nothing in return. This man who saw potential where she saw only wreckage. For the first time since her mother died, Elena allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't just survival. Spring arrived in Montana like a whispered promise. The snow melted, revealing patches of green that spread across the valley. The horses grew frisky with the warmer weather, and the workload on the ranch intensified. Elena had been with Cole for 2 months, and the rhythms of ranch life had become her own heartbeat. She could read the sky for weather, knew each horse by temperament, and could throw hay bales with arms that had grown strong from daily labor. But something else was growing too, something she tried desperately to ignore. It started with small moments. Cole's hand steadying her when she slipped on wet boards. The way his eyes crinkled when she said something that amused him. How he always saved her the last cup of coffee in the morning pot. The warmth in her chest when she heard his truck coming up the drive at the end of the day. Elena told herself it was gratitude. He'd saved her life. Of course she felt connected to him. But gratitude didn't explain why her pulse quickened when he stood close, or why she'd started wearing the one decent shirt she owned instead of just work clothes. Gratitude didn't explain the jealousy that flared when a woman from town stopped by to bring Cole a pie and flirted shamelessly while Elena mucked stalls within earshot. She was falling for him, and that terrified her. "You're quiet today," Cole observed one afternoon. They were riding out to check on the cattle in the north pasture, the horses moving at an easy walk beneath them. "Just thinking," Elena said. "About the application." She'd finally taken Cole's advice and applied to the veterinary tech program in Helena. The acceptance letter had arrived 3 days ago, along with a financial aid package that would cover most of her tuition. She should have been ecstatic. Instead, she felt torn in two. Having second thoughts. Cole asked. "No. Yes. I don't know." Elena sighed. "It's a great opportunity. I'd be stupid not to take it. But I'd have to leave the ranch." "Leave?" she caught herself. "Leave this work. And you'd be back to managing everything alone." Cole reined in his horse and turned to look at her. "Elena, I'll hire another hand. That's not a reason to give up your dream." "What if it's not just about the work?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. Something flickered across Cole's face. For a moment, Elena thought he might say something, but then he looked away, jaw tight. "You should go to Helena. Build the life you deserve. Don't let anything hold you back." The rejection, gentle as it was, stung worse than her father's fists. Elena nodded and kicked her horse forward, ending the conversation. They spent the rest of the ride in silence. That night, Elena lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. She'd been a fool to think Cole saw her as anything more than a project, someone to rescue and set on the right path. He'd been kind, but kindness wasn't love. She needed to protect herself, to leave before her feelings grew even deeper. She just drifted off to sleep when a sound woke her. Shouting, coming from outside. Elena threw on her jacket and ran downstairs. Through the kitchen window, she could see flames. The barn was on fire. Cole was already out there, pulling horses from their stalls. Elena sprinted across the yard, her heart hammering. The heat hit her like a physical force, and smoke burned her lungs. 3 horses were out, panicked and rearing, but she could hear another screaming inside. "Elena, no!" Cole shouted as she ran toward the barn entrance. She ignored him. The mare in the back stall was pregnant, close to foaling. Elena grabbed a wet blanket someone had dropped, pressed it to her face, and plunged into the smoke. The world became a nightmare of orange light and choking darkness. She found the mare's stall by memory, fumbled with the latch, and threw it open. The horse reared, wild-eyed with terror. Elena grabbed her halter, yanked hard, and pulled. The mare resisted, then suddenly bolted, nearly trampling Elena in her panic. Elena ran after her, lungs screaming, vision narrowing to a tunnel. She almost made it. A beam cracked above her head. Elena looked up and saw the ceiling collapsing, saw her death falling toward her in a shower of sparks and burning wood. Then something slammed into her from the side, and she was flying, rolling, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. They hit the ground outside the barn. Cole had tackled her, his body covering hers as debris rained down where she'd been standing a second before. The barn roof collapsed with a roar that shook the earth. Cole rolled off her, coughing violently. "Are you insane?" he shouted, his voice hoarse with smoke and fury. "You could have died." "So could you." Elena shouted back. "You ran in after me." "Because you're—" He stopped, breathing hard, his face smudged with ash and lit by the burning barn. "Because I can't lose you." The world seemed to hold its breath. Fire trucks wailed in the distance, too late to save the barn but coming anyway. The horses milled in the paddock, safe. And Elena stared at Cole, at the raw emotion on his face, and understood what he'd been too afraid to say. "Cole," she whispered. He pulled her to him, his hands framing her face, and kissed her with the desperation of a man who'd just stared down his worst fear. Elena melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with everything she'd been holding inside for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole pressed his forehead to hers. "I told you to go to Helena because I thought it was the right thing. Because you deserve better than a broke rancher who can barely keep his head above water. Not because I wanted you to go." "I don't want better," Elena said fiercely. "I want you. I want this life. But I need to know I'm not just someone you saved. I need to know you see me as more than a project." "Elena." Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "You stopped being a project the day you made coffee without being asked. You stopped being a stranger the first time you laughed at one of my terrible jokes. I've been falling for you for weeks, and I've been terrified because the last person I cared about," his voice broke. "I couldn't save her." "I'm not your sister," Elena said gently. "And I'm not leaving unless you tell me to." The barn was a total loss. Insurance would cover some of it, but Cole had been underinsured, a mistake he'd made during leaner years that had come back to haunt him. The morning after the fire, they stood in the wreckage, surveying the damage while volunteers from town helped round up scattered equipment and check on the livestock. "Could have been worse," Doc Morrison said, clapping Cole on the shoulder. "No one died, and the horses are all safe. You can rebuild." But Elena saw the weight in Cole's eyes. Rebuilding would cost money he didn't have. She'd heard him on the phone with the insurance company, heard the numbers that fell far short of what was needed. The ranch had been struggling before, this might be the blow that finally broke it. That night, after the volunteers had gone and they'd moved the horses to a neighbor's property temporarily, Elena found Cole in his office, surrounded by paperwork, his head in his hands. "Talk to me," she said from the doorway. Cole looked up, exhaustion written in every line of his face. "I'm trying to figure out how to keep this place afloat. The insurance payout will cover maybe 60% of rebuilding the barn. I've got a loan payment due next month that I was planning to make with money from selling 3 horses, but now I've got nowhere to train them properly. Without that sale." He trailed off. Elena pulled up a chair. "Then we figure it out together." "Elena, this isn't your problem." "Yes, it is." Her voice was firm. "You made me part of this place. You made me part of your life. That means your problems are my problems now. So stop trying to protect me and let me help." Cole stared at her for a long moment, then something in his shoulders relaxed. "All right. You got any ideas?" They worked through the night, drinking coffee and brainstorming. Elena suggested reaching out to the rodeo circuit. Cole had a reputation for training excellent barrel racing horses, but he'd never marketed himself aggressively. She proposed starting a small boarding operation, using the neighbor's facilities temporarily until they rebuilt. She even suggested crowdfunding, though Cole was resistant to asking for charity. "It's not charity," Elena insisted. "It's community investment. You've helped half the people in this county at one point or another. Let them help you back." By dawn, they had a plan. It was ambitious and would require both of them working nearly round the clock, but it was possible. Elena called the college in Helena and asked about online classes and part-time enrollment. Cole reached out to every contact he had in the horse breeding world. Within a week, they had 3 horses boarded, 2 training contracts, and a crowdfunding campaign that had raised $10,000. The town rallied around them in ways that left Elena speechless. Neighbors showed up with tools and muscle for barn-raising days. Local businesses donated materials at cost. The woman who'd flirted with Cole months ago arrived with her husband and 3 sons, all ready to work. Even Doc Morrison spent his weekends hammering nails. 8 weeks after the fire, the new barn stood complete. It wasn't fancy, but it was solid, with better ventilation and safer stall designs. The first horse they brought back was the pregnant mare Elena had saved. She foaled 2 days later, a strong colt that Cole insisted on naming Hope. "Two on the nose?" he asked Elena as they watched the foal nurse, his arm around her waist. "It's perfect," she said, leaning into him. Elena started her online classes that fall, studying at night after the ranch work was done. It was exhausting, but she'd never been happier. Cole proposed to her on a cold November morning while they were feeding the horses. There was no grand gesture, no fancy ring, just him, covered in hay, asking if she'd want to make this partnership permanent. She said yes before he'd finished the question. They married in the spring, a small ceremony at the ranch with the people who'd helped them rebuild. Elena wore a simple dress from the thrift store in town, and Cole wore his good boots. Doc Morrison officiated, and Elena's maid of honor was a woman from town who'd taken her in for coffee one day and become a friend. Her father wasn't invited. Elena had driven past his house once, months ago, and seen him stumbling to his truck in the middle of the afternoon. She'd felt nothing, not anger, not sadness, just a distant acknowledgement that some people were too broken to fix. He'd made his choice, and she'd made hers. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. The ranch thrived. Elena's boarding and training business grew until they had a waiting list. She completed her veterinary tech certification and started working part-time at Doc Morrison's clinic, combining her two passions. Cole's horses gained a reputation for quality that brought buyers from 3 states. On their first anniversary, Elena found Cole in the barn with a mare he'd been working with for months. She was one of his favorites, a beautiful paint with a stubborn streak. "I have news," Elena said, unable to keep the smile off her face. Cole looked up from examining the mare's hoof. "Good news, I hope." "Depends on how you feel about our partnership expanding." She placed his hand on her stomach. "By one more. Around December." Cole's eyes widened. Then he swept her into his arms, spinning her around while the mare snorted her disapproval at the commotion. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious." He set her down gently, his hands cradling her face. "You've given me everything. A reason to keep fighting for this place. A reason to believe good things can happen. And now this." His voice broke. "How did I get this lucky?" "You saw someone who needed help, and you didn't look away," Elena said. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You made me believe I was worth saving." "You saved yourself," Cole said. "You got on that bus. You survived. You fought. I just gave you a place to land." Their daughter was born on a snowy December night. She had Elena's dark hair and Cole's gray eyes, and they named her Emma Rose, Emma for the sister Cole had lost, Rose for Elena's mother. When Elena held her for the first time, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 2,000 miles of desperation. A father's rejection. A beating that could have ended her. And then a cowboy who'd seen her at her lowest and said, "You're worth fighting for." The ranch was theirs now, truly theirs. Every board in the barn, every fence post, every horse in the paddock represented their shared sweat and determination. Elena had traveled 2,000 miles to be rejected and beaten, but in the wreckage of that rejection, she'd found something infinitely more valuable than a father's acceptance. She'd found herself. She'd found purpose. She'd found a man who made her his world, not out of pity or obligation, but because he'd seen her strength when she couldn't see it herself. As Elena stood on the porch with her daughter in her arms, watching Cole work with the horses in the paddock, the Montana mountains rising behind him in the late afternoon sun, she understood that some journeys don't take you where you plan to go. They take you where you need to be. And this ranch, this life, this man who'd pulled her from the dirt and shown her that kindness still existed in a cruel world, this was where she needed to be. This was home. This was family. This was the world they'd built together from nothing but determination and love. The wind swept down from the mountains, carrying the smell of hay and horses and the promise of spring. Elena smiled, kissed her daughter's forehead, and walked out to join her husband in the life they'd created, a life that had been born from rejection but bloomed into something beautiful and unshakable. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to find that she'd been searching for home all along. And a cowboy with kind eyes and strong hands had helped her build it.